Welcome to another episode of A Question of Meaning with Arthur and Katie. And
Howdy, folks.
so here we are to talk again. And Jeff Turner, noticed we'd put our guitars down a few weeks ago. And we've been doing that. We're actually having a good time just talking. It seems more natural. So I hope you're enjoying it also. And so what are we talking about this week, Arthur?
Well, I had one thing on my mind. I don't have a particular subject, but watching the reruns of the show that we tape live, just turn the camera on for an hour and what you see is what you get. I mean, I can really see that I got a lot of anger, and I've always known this. I'm a spoiled brat, and I've always liked to get my way. And there's always tons to criticize in the world and in society, and I've kind of made that my specialty. And it's real unconscious behavior. Anger is always a symptom of madness, of insanity. And when, we're writing a book on the subject, you would think if you wrote a book on these subjects that maybe you would practice what you preach, as it were. But in my case, it certainly doesn't seem to be the case. And so, what am I trying to say? I don't believe in apologies. It's literally like, I'm sorry for breathing. I apologize for being insane, because that's what being angry is. But I do, for the sake of it, for the form of it, to acknowledge that I've made a lot of people wrong, and I've used really demeaning terms like redneck and bumpkin and worse, describing people whose politics doesn't I don't see as valid. I grew up around racism, and one of the cornerstones that we've talked about on this show is the basis of all fear is the unknown, and the basis of all hatred is fear. If you're afraid of it, you hate it. If you hate it, you're afraid of it. And so anger is an expression of hatred. And I do hate the right wing. I hate George W. Bush and everything he stands for. And yet, when I have had trouble on the road, somebody who probably voted for George W. Bush would be the first one to stop and offer help. And I've seen that repeatedly. People whose politics I could not disagree with more, I don't think it's possible, are really decent people. And maybe what really keyed this in, there's an internet site called the Daily Howler by this incredible guy who was Al Gore's roommate. His name is Bob Summerby.
Roommate in college, you mean?
A roommate in college, I should say. Maybe now that Al's free, they could get back together. Well, anyway.
Just wanted to clarify.
And that he recently did a column. You can look up in his archives. Look for, I think King is in the title of the page. But Bob has been for quite a long time. He's been talking about how liberals are increasingly playing fast and loose with the facts. The facts, the objective facts, like Joe Friday said, just the facts. That's all we've got. That's our lifeline out of the darkness. That is the basis of reason, and the only hope we have is operating from the facts, not blind superstition or myth or hope or prejudice. And he's been really climbing on the likes of Keith Olbermann and Rachel Maddow, and I read it every time, and I think, it's me too he's talking about. People who are afraid of the right wing and subsequently hate the right wing. I wrote a song called Honk If You Love Judas, because you know that Jesus would. Or Judas would have hung himself. You think Jesus would have said, no way am I going to forgive you. You're the exception. So I write songs like that. I write books about the subject, but I still manage to operate from a low boil to an explosive outburst of anger on a regular basis. And anyway, to get back to this column that Bob did, he talked about Martin Luther King in 1956, the night that he was at a speaking event and found it in the same city. I can't remember right offhand where it was. The bus boycotts?
Yeah, Montgomery.
Montgomery.
Yeah, Montgomery, Alabama.
When his home was bombed with his wife and a little daughter inside. And until he got to the house, he didn't know whether they were dead or not. He didn't know whether they were okay. And there was an angry crowd had formed outside. These black people were. Talk about anger. And some of them had weapons, and the police commissioner was having no effect in trying to calm them down. And King got up and called for silence, which was immediately respected. And he said, "We can't hate. Have patience. Calm yourselves. Anybody with a weapon, take it home. We have to show our white brothers that we love them." He assured him that his family was okay. He had found that out. It's and love, the willingness to have really violent people commit acts of violence against you and to keep going in spite of it, not hit back, not retaliate, not use angry, insulting rhetoric. That's what liberated the blacks in Southern apartheid. And his mentor, he learned, he wrote in his book, was none less than Mahatma Gandhi. And that was Gandhi's approach, nonviolent, confrontational, civil disobedience. You're breaking their evil laws, and you're willing to suffer the consequences, but you will not fight back. You will not hate them back. And therein you rise above that level of deep unconsciousness. And how King realized, he wrote in his memoirs, oh, do you remember the name of the book?
No. I actually looked it up in the library. And
It was Marching Toward Freedom, I think. Striding Toward Freedom was the name of the book. His memoirs of the boycott, Montgomery bus boycott. And Gandhi said, there are many causes worth dying for. There is no cause worth killing for. And King took that to heart, and Mahatma Gandhi got the British Empire off of India. And the blacks, I've seen it with my own eyes, getting beaten savagely out of people who are pure ignorant. And that's what King got to. I'm sorry, I'm a little trying to remember all this. King said that he realized that these people who were the haters and who were doing the bombing, all of it, shots, shooting at him, these people were raised in that Southern system, and they couldn't help it. They were misinformed. Sound familiar? Sound a little bit like forgive them, for they know not what they do. If you're dealing with someone who's in an insane asylum, you have compassion toward them. You understand they're mentally ill. But the book that we're working on, and maybe one day I'll actually start manifesting in my life, is about that very thing. We think at this level in evolution, we are, in a very specific way, but a very real way, operationally insane, all of us. We confuse what's in our mind, in our minds, with what actually is, what we call objective reality. We confuse our subjective opinion with objective fact. And so for what it's worth, I apologize for being demeaning to the right wing, to George W. Bush, to Rush Limbaugh, to Glenn Beck. I don't want to hate you. If I hate you back, you've won. Because I think a lot of these people, that's their claim to fame. They're rabble rousers. And any progressives out there that can relate to this, I invite you to join me in looking at the inefficacy of hatred and the pitfall of ego, of elitism, that you think you're better. You think you're better. I think I'm better, and I'm wrong. In fact, our first book, The Game of God, Recovering Your True Identity, gameofgod.com, says that who we really are is God in a state of amnesia, an expression of God in amnesia. Acronym is AOGA. So given that, God can't be better than God. And if we treated each other like that, like the old Eastern greeting, namaste, I bow to the God within you. You're not God, but God is in an amnesic state, lost, believing that God, it's you. So for what it's worth, I'll try to watch my anger and try to come from a slightly more compassionate place. It wouldn't be hard.
Wow.
Okay.
That was really, really wonderful, Arthur. I have to say I really enjoyed that. And I was moved. If you wanted to look up the Daily Howler, dailyhowler.com, it's very moving. It was around September 3rd, September 4th, if you're
Yes.
looking in his archives,
Yeah.
somewhere in that date range. And one of the things that was really moving to me about what Martin Luther King said that night, and he gave a few different versions. There's Parting the Waters is a wonderful history of the civil rights movement, and there's an account of that, what Dr. King said that night in there. But one of the things he was said to have said that night is not only love your enemies, but let them know that you love them. And that really impacted me because it's easy to, try to be compassionate and sit in your home and meditate and feel love in your little cubicle, in your little prayer closet, and then go out and just be ordinary during the daytime. But the real key is not just to sometimes feel it in your heart, but to let them know that you love them. And that's happening in your actions and when you're out there in the world around people. And that's when it gets hard, but that's the rubber hitting the road, is that your actions are expressing the love for those people. And that's when you're really going to make a difference with it, I would think. I mean, just there's that kind of new agey idea that if we all meditate and open up space in our consciousness through prayer and meditation for love to happen on the world, it'll just sort of just magically effervesce. All that hatred will effervesce and love will just come down, and we won't really have to change our behavior. It'll just sort of happen magically. And that's what that statement says to me is, we need to be out there. And that's what Dr. King did, was he was out there doing it with his actions. That's what his speaking on his porch that night was doing, was manifesting it, was letting them, the people. And he, when the police commissioner tried to speak after Dr. King, and the crowd booed him, and Dr. King said, no, let him speak. And
didn't you understand what I just said?
That's right. I mean, there he immediately gave an example.
Listen to the commissioner.
That's right. Show respect. And
then he talked about when he went home later that night. They spent the night. Their house had been bombed in a church member's home. And he woke up in the night. He couldn't sleep, and he was thinking about what kind of person would bomb someone's home, knowing who knows who was in there. And he started feeling a rise of anger, which is also, to your point, very. If you're angry, it would be good to get in touch with it. Not, like the old Mel Lyman line. Charlie Manson talked about love and went around killing people. We don't talk about love. So it could be helpful to kind of cop to where you're at. And he copped to it. He felt this anger rising. And he said, no, you must not. You must resist the temptation to become bitter. Mm-hmm. And I think my anger has probably taken a turn more toward the bitter when you get old. I'll be 65 in a couple of weeks. Not even a couple of weeks. And you see the movie over and over again. I see it in my own life. There are things that I still do that I shouldn't do. But I'm still governed by my thought patterns, my surviving belief systems, as we have called them in this show. Still ego-dominated, still wanting my way. My way in the worst sense. And I certainly see it outside me. I see what everybody's going to go vote Republican now. We're going to go back to the George Bush plan. We didn't learn our lesson after 8 years, culminating in a financial catastrophe. We're going to go back to them. I remember reading after the Soviet Union, in polls, a lot of the people in Russia wanted to go back to I don't even want to use the word socialism. It was so not. They wanted to go back to the good old days in the Soviet Union. And just incredulous. Didn't you learn anything? Doesn't liberty mean anything at all to you? But what to do? there doesn't seem to be any alternative. Anyway, and I definitely want to digress into politics, although it would be interesting to talk politics and not be angry for a change.
Right. But so what did Dr. King say? He said that it's the mental programming that has people, their thinking processes have been set in channels by their family and by their educational system, by their culture. And so in the South, in really the whole country, I grew up in the North, let me tell you, racism was just as present in the North. There was a politer face on top of it.
Yeah, there wasn't codified like white and color.
Yeah, but I can remember a black couple coming to our door because they knew my dad professionally, and this must have been in the late 60s, and they had wanted to look at a house in our neighborhood, and they were not allowed to look at it, not even look at it. And so my dad went with them and forced the realtor to show the house. But of course, they didn't buy it and weren't allowed to buy it. And that was in St. Louis. So our culture has just shaped our thinking. And so it's hard for us to think in new ways because we have been so programmed, and one of the reasons it's so hard for us to think in new ways is because we're not even aware that we've been programmed. We think we're free. We think for ourselves. We think we make our own decisions freely based on what we see in front of us, and we are so ignorant of the ways that programming has shaped us. And I mean, I was in the Soviet Union in 1979, and life was really hard, but there was ways that life was easy, which was there were no choices. You took what you got, and you had to wait in long lines, but there were jobs. It wasn't like the free market where you're thrown out of work and then you have to desperately search for jobs. Pretty much everybody had their place, and you didn't have to worry about your job. And so
you weren't in control.
The end of
the state was in control.
Right. So the end of communism meant all of a sudden all sorts of choices, all sorts of responsibilities. So life was a lot harder in many, many ways.
Can you imagine the slaves after the Civil War? I mean, when they were afraid.
So, even though we look from the outside and say, how could they possibly want to go back? Well, if that was your culture, if that was your programming, if that's what you had been raised to know, that was all you knew, well, then a completely separate system would be unpleasant and would be difficult. And so you can understand it. So this is the type of understanding we're talking about, the kind of compassion is that walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. Don't judge them from my way of thinking.
I got a great example.
Because my way of thinking is not their way of thinking.
Since we're progressives.
Yeah.
I started thinking the other day, I think after I read this, about the 60s and the world youth movement. Mm-hmm. And I found myself actually considering that for the first time, from the, that's what insanity does.
That's right.
From the straight point of view, from the conservative point of view. When you see young people turning on, dropping out and, I don't know, getting naked on the street. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. The young people went wild. We went crazy. We thought, and we did LSD, and suddenly we saw that private property is a joke, stuff like that. We saw that all you need is love, which turned out to be far from the truth. But it isn't, in a way. As a matter of fact, I think that's what Summerby said, that King might as well have been writing Beatle lyrics 10 years before the fact.
Right.
Because what King was saying was all you need is love. Mm-hmm. It's the best way to deal with existent reality. We define love as the experience of unconditional acceptance of what is, the way it is. And you may want to change it, but you accept what is as it is right now, where reality is. So I got into the perspective of conservative Americans post-World War II, post-Korean, want to have a quiet, placid life, just pay their bills and have 2 cars.
Don't forget that either. Also,
and suddenly, seemingly, there's a generation of wild, ravening beasts they've produced who are listening to rock and roll and doing drugs, illegal drugs, and growing their hair long and wearing weird clothes and just running wild. I think there's actually a movie called Wild in the Streets. I never saw it. I should. It's about I think a hippie got to be president.
Oh, you're kidding?
That's great. I have to look that one up here and remember. And what did that look like to these people? I mean, try to, Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird said, if you're ever going to understand somebody, you got to get inside their skin and walk around in it, or walk a mile in someone else's shoes. And then you can maybe understand what's driving and motivating them to hate, to fear the change, to look at these wild young people who are dropping out of college, burning their draft cards, burning their bras. I mean, how unthinkable. Breaking every social custom they can spot. Sounds a lot like me. And culminating maybe, I was in Los Angeles in 1969, living in Hollywood, no car, living month to month as usual. And I was hitchhiking around LA. I was doing that. I was hitchhiking effectively around LA until they caught Shirley Manson. Susan Atkins, one of the Manson girls, made the mistake of talking in front of a cellmate, and that's how they got him, if you remember your Manson trivia. And Life magazine had a full-page photograph of him and all of this craziness. And man, I didn't get a ride. I had to that was it. Nobody picked up a hippie. I mean, because it looked like that was the culmination of this madness, was resulting in somebody like Manson, who of course is a mental patient long before he grew his hair long.
Yeah, but all these years you've hated those people. Hated the moral.
They're just squares.
The silent majority that elected
thinking,
Richard Nixon.
Unimaginative.
Right.
Intellectually incurious.
That's right.
Excuse me.
Square to the bone. Not as good as us, for sure. I mean, just, that goes without saying, really. It's so obvious.
I guess they're just pure evil.
Stupid.
Stupid and evil.
That's right.
Team stupid and team evil, remember?
That's right.
John, on the Daily Show, another elitist show, laughing at ignorance and showing how we're so superior to them, but not really understanding what's behind the fear. I mean, these are people who were really patriotic. A lot of these people were veterans and had, gone through major wars. And as far as they were concerned, the draft was like a holy institution. What do you mean you're running away to Canada? What do you mean you're doing drugs? What do you mean you're burning your draft card? What kind of insanity is that? And in fact, history has shown that the people who resisted going to Vietnam were right. It was a flawed, hopeless enterprise. There was no way anybody was going to stop the inevitability of George Washington / Ho Chi Minh reuniting his country. And any good history will show you that.
Yeah, but the people at the time, what they saw was the questioning it was
you were a
like
traitor.
striking at the heart of what all that had been built, and that how hard it was to build the prosperous society that we had. That people had gone, had fought in World War II and died, and the suffering of the Great Depression, and so you were undermining what had been built through great sacrifice, and that was what hurt them. That's what they were afraid of. They were afraid the hippies were going to destroy what they had worked so hard to build, and so you can understand that it looked that way.
It would be good to understand that instead of just dismissing them as small-minded squares.
And that's what I think people, if you can bring that same understanding to what's going on today, that the Tea Party and the right wing, that they are afraid of That's what the whole socialism cry is, that they're afraid that the liberal progressive ideas will destroy what it is to be American.
Death
They
panels.
really believe that.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what it's easy to, when you dismiss other people, you think they don't really believe the rhetoric, that they're just being evil and just trying to get you. But these people, that's the truth, is that they sincerely believe that this would wreck America. And that, in my mind, they're misguided and misinformed. But is that...
And that's up for debate.
Right.
That's...
I could be...
You can ask them a
What
question
do you mean?
there.
I'm wrong?
You can debate on the merit
Right.
of the facts.
Right.
They were wrong. The conservatives were wrong about the environmental movement. They were way wrong about the communism taking over the world. They're wrong about racism. That was conservatives that were standing in the way. Conservatives, somebody politically basically wants to keep things the way they are. They don't want change. Or you should be patient. Gay marriage, for God's sake, give me a break. Are we that insecure? And when you are insecure, which is a state of not knowing, which means we're all insecure because nobody actually knows what anything even is. You look in the mirror, you think you know what that is? You don't, according to our work. No is an absolute state. You either know or you don't know. To be or not to be. That's the only option, not to be. Fortunately, because we think the universe and everything in it is merely God in an amnesic state, there's no such thing as not being, with just a dandy imitation of it. If you've ever watched a dog decompose on the side of the road, it looks like not being is really real. It's interesting. I think this is the way, because we've always talked on this show about how if insanity is confusing your opinion, your mind-generated reality, with actual reality, whatever that is out there, obviously we're all insane because nobody knows what actual reality actually is. But the great paradox and the positive spin on that is the more we acknowledge and face and experience how little we know, the more we know. He who knows doesn't know, but he who doesn't know knows. You know that you don't know. And the more you know that you don't know, the more you know. It works like that, and that's ultimately to the point of enlightenment. That's what enlightenment is. The guru is the fool on the hill who isn't full of half knowledge claiming that it's absolute knowledge, not an expert. When the blooper happens in the computer circuits at a Pakistani missile site and launches against India, which retaliates, which alarms China, which ends with a whimper, humankind. And we're in such a precarious position right now. And our country is like such a classic example of polarized opinions and people. The whole country is maybe as divided as I've ever seen it. I guess that's true. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah. See, I think there's a good example of, do we really know something? We say things like that, and then you read history, and it's incredible the kind of stuff you want to go back to 1859, just before the Civil War. I imagine it was a pretty polarized situation.
We're cantankerous people. We're always at each other's throats. There is truth in that.
Yeah.
However, the doomsday clock has never been this close. There wasn't a doomsday clock. And now there is. And if we're going to have any kind of cooperation here and get ourselves out of this, I'll see if I can say this without anger. The Republicans and the laughable blue dog Democrats are such obstructionists at a time of national emergency. Never in my lifetime has the economy been in this condition. And it was allowed to do so because of the deep corruption of our political system. These people in Washington are on the payroll of corporations and the wealthy, and they do what they're told. They vote like they're paid. They're paid to vote a certain way, and they do. And that's why it looks the way it does. That's why the income disparity is so high. And this whole section up there is just standing in the hallways and blocking off the halls and not lifting a finger. And it's so patently obvious that they are trying to bring the Obama administration down. These people will do anything. They made the Clintons' lives living hell for almost every year those people were in office, when Bill Clinton was in office. And how any kind of awake public could possibly vote for a return to Bush policies, which is basically what it is. They're not offering anything new. This is George W. Bush. Do you see how that turned out after 8 years? 2 horrendous wars, one completely unnecessary. And so let's talk facts. I mean, how do you engage with someone that you disagree with without making them wrong? How do you do that? How do you respect a person that votes Republican? I mean, I can get into their heads and I can see all this threat, and they're still getting over the 60s. And I think the Republican philosophy, the conservative philosophy, is pretty much buy cheap and sell dear. Is pretty much based on complete selfishness. I earned it. I don't see why I should pay any taxes at all. I get to keep everything I can keep.
Well, maybe I think that, I mean, because it's kind of unclear what you're talking about there. What I was thinking when you were talking about it is, what movie did we just see about the Civil War? The
Ride with the Devil.
Ride with the Devil, which after about 10 minutes, I asked Arthur, why are we sympathizing with the South here? I found it really curious. I grew up in Missouri, and I would really have liked to have learned more about, what happened in Missouri, because that's what I had always known that it was a horrible place to be, because it wasn't South, it wasn't North, it was torn to shreds. But I didn't really learn much more about that from the movie after 2 hours or 20 minutes or whatever. But I found it really curious that it was the Southerners that were the ones that were the heroes, and I'm like, okay. And at one point, these Southerners do a ride into Kansas, which was an abolitionist state. Kansas was founded by people who were trying to end slavery, and that there was a town called Liberal. Well, no, it wasn't Liberal. Lawrence. There is a town called Liberal, but the town called Lawrence, which now has a university. But these people had started a school, and this was like horrible, the idea of a public school, which is also something I had just learned about, that in, I believe it's Mississippi or Alabama, one of those 2 states, there were no public schools until after the Civil War, because certainly here, the whole structure of society was the rich people, the plantation owners, had their children were educated at home through private tutors, and you don't want to educate the poor whites, because you want them to keep them in their place, and then the blacks. I mean, obviously the slaves you don't want them to be able to read, so there were no schools. So the idea of here was a school, and the threat that the school made to the whole structure of Southern society meant these guys, these Southern sympathizer fighters, went to Kansas to, that was one of their principal aims, was to burn the school. That was the symbol of what was coming. And so this combination of, why am I sympathizing with the Southerners and people that are wanting to destroy a school, when why wasn't the film built around the struggle of the people on the other side, the ones that were the school builders, the ones that were trying to build a better society, the ones that were trying to end racism and slavery?
No, because they weren't painted, including the part of the film that was the raid on Lawrence. They weren't portrayed as sympathetic at all.
No.
Necessarily. They were like cardboard cutouts. It
Totally.
was like the Blazing Saddles when they come riding into town, just
and the
shooting and a whooping.
The Union people were burning up things as much as the Southerners. I mean,
They're definitely painted as the villain. The sympathy of the film was clearly toward the Southerners.
The film, what the film did for me though, was was just kind of energized. I hadn't even told Arthur this. I felt like I want to make my country a better place. I want to be the school builder. I want to be on that
Expand it out
side.
to the world, and I'll join
Yes.
you.
Well, but I mean, okay. So, but that's what I mean. I want to make the world a better place, and that was what was being destroyed in this movie. And for me, that's when I have a problem with conservatism. I feel like that's what they're doing. It's about destroying the impulse to a better world, to a more just, a more equal world. And that's when you talk about what's wrong with conservatives. That's what they did under Clinton, and that's what they're doing under Obama, is being completely obstructionist and just blocking anything instead of working with. And what happened in the Bush era to make this country a better place? I can't think of one thing. Not one thing. We went to war and they did tax cuts. What else was accomplished? I can't think of anything. And, that's for me what the liberals, when you're a liberal, you're trying to do is make the world a better place. And you may be wrong, but at least that's where you're coming from. That's your desire. And
like Dave Barry said, your car can break down on the side of the road, and a conservative will drive right past you because they're in such a rush to get to ugly pants night at the country club. But a liberal will stop. I think it was Republican and Democrat. A Democrat will stop and try to help you. Will probably set your car on fire in the process.
So,
at least we're trying. We may screw up, but.
And I think that's what I was getting to was, okay, so this is, I think, the liberal impulse. But, and maybe what's wrong with liberals is because we get arrogant and we think we're right and they're wrong. And that's where what has blocked us so much is to remember that the conservatives are afraid. And I sometimes see the political system as like a toothed wheel. And the liberals are just, the wheel just spinning. And what the conservatives are, they're the brake. They're what hold us from just spinning into maybe
Wild
out of control.
In the streets.
And so realize that there is also a place for the conservative, the holding on to things that are of value. And so that's what's wrong with liberals, is that we don't have that humility to admit that we're wrong and to have that conversation, and we're so ready to just condemn the other side.
Well, I think it would behoove us to find a middle ground. Maybe we need a marriage counselor. Maybe that's what Obama's trying to be. He keeps reaching out, much to my chagrin. He extends his hand out, and it comes back covered with, elephant dung, and it's amazing. It's also perfect. When you give an ape, for those who subscribe to the theory of evolution, you give even that, I had to say it with a smirk, since science doesn't mean anything anymore. They're trying to impose these draconian religious nonsense on science, which when you get in an elevator, and there's not many elevators in Asheville, but the next time you get on an elevator, the faith you have that thing is going to take you up or down at a comfortable speed, the functioning of that machine, just like the internal combustion engine that controlled violence in your car, is not the product of faith or hope or belief, but on proven scientific fact, on data that has undergone trial by fire to say this is true, within certain limits to be discovered experimentally or experientially. But this is true. And to try to let beliefs, and I'm all for faith, whatever floats your boat. That's your right to believe that. But don't confuse that with proven fact that has allowed us to take a 364-foot rocket with 8 million pounds of thrust at the first stage and fire them into space and let them land on the moon, drive around on it, and come back in one piece. don't confuse that with faith or hope or belief or wishful thinking. It's a whole different thing. And that's really what the separation of church and state is all about. You can believe whatever you want. Daniel Patrick Moynihan said that everyone is entitled to their own beliefs. Everyone is not entitled to their own facts. So if there's a place where we can meet in the light, it should be based on objective fact. This is this, and it's limited by our current level of evolution and awareness. But for now, this is how your car can get fixed. I don't hope that my brakes are going to last when they start making a funny noise. I don't pray for some invisible being to come and get my brakes fixed. I call a garage, and they deal with grease and nuts and bolts and stuff. And when they get through waiting in there and cluttering around, suddenly the brakes work. A miracle. A miracle. So maybe we could focus on that. Oh, my conservative compadres out there, look at your track record. Look at the hysteria about Vietnam. You called people like me, you called us traitors, commie lovers, get out of the country, go live in Russia. And maybe if our side had really held sway, it finally did. It finally broke you down with some troubling facts like the Tet Offensive in 1968, where they were running loose having gunfights on the Saigon embassy grounds. When enough facts accumulated, we finally slunk out of Vietnam with our tail between our legs, with 50,000 names carved on a black wall underground in the Washington Mall. That statement, the way that monument is configured, is incredibly eloquent of just what a black stain on our nation that is. I was reading in the New Yorker last night about life under Ahmadinejad and Iran, and I was reading how political prisoners had been tortured and were often in secret locations, and I felt myself getting really angry, and then I went, oh, I can't do that anymore. George W. Bush took that away. George W. Bush and that Dick Cheney monster, he really psychologically deeply damaged human being. Those two and their cohort removed the moral high ground from this country. Katie, you did a column on that, didn't you?
Yeah, I did a few years ago. Well, probably about 2007, I guess. It was called "What George Bush Took from Me," and it was things like, exactly that. That I used to be able to go, oh, thank God I don't live in a country like that, but now I live in a country like that.
Osama, you won.
Yeah, look what's happening with the mosque controversy.
Oh, God.
That
Freedom of speech, gang. If the Nazi Party wants to march down Main Street, they're Americans. That's their right. Mm-hmm. You may despise everything they stand for, but that's their right. And you can stand on the curb and yell anything you want. That's your right. Mm-hmm. But to deny them that right? Don't you get it? It's real simple. It's called freedom of speech. You either have it or you don't. Up to fire in a crowded theater. When's the last time anybody heard that? Had an experience of someone yelling fire in a crowded theater. We get it already. Or calling in bomb threats. That's not freedom of speech. Mm-hmm. That's harmful mischief. So maybe we can meet at the light. What we're trying to say is, I'm still grappling with this, because when I start thinking about a lifetime, I've been a freak all my life. I have chosen the path less traveled. I'm a conscientious objector, excused from alternative civilian duty, like filling potholes on the road or handling bedpans in a mental hospital, due to a bad back. My draft deferment was 4Y. And I fought long and hard for that. I don't like to be told what to do. I like as much freedom as I can get. And at the end of the road, what I've discovered is All honor is fleeting, to quote General Patton. Well, all freedom is basically illusory, with one exception: the freedom to be humble, the freedom to embrace humility, the freedom to realize how little we know and how flawed we are and how not better than anyone else we are. Both sides.
So, but you started that by saying that when you think about maybe someone like Rush Limbaugh or Glenn Beck, you can feel the desire to get angry. Is that what you were saying? It sounded like you were going to go there.
Conservatism in general, thank you.
So,
I'm on medication. My back's gone out.
So, but I thought this would be, because I thought I'm bringing it up because I think it'd be an interesting thing to talk about. So, what is the root of that maybe we could, find or pursue it a little bit? What's the root of the anger? I mean,
you know what just came up with a song I wrote called You. What you hate outside you's living in you, and you hate it in you too. It does take one to know one, but I lie and say, I'm better off than you. We've got to see that we're all the same, and this little time's so quickly done. And to love ourselves in darkness is the key that opens up the sun. Rush Limbaugh is me. Glenn Beck is me. Sarah Palin is me. Michelle Bachmann is me. Ann Coulter is me. In the way that really matters, we're identical. There are superficial veils created by psychological forces, either overtly cynical, like doing that for profit, like being a hate monger for fame and fortune, or because you really believe it. They're equally crazy. And I have lived a lot of my life justifying myself through my philosophy, my behavior, my long hair, my folk singing, prided myself that I have been at the pinnacle of the human experiment, while countless legions are found wanting. And it's a lie. What will bring us together is that equality, is that sense of equality. Some people are misinformed, and some people can take criticism, and some can't. I've always had trouble with it.
Oh, me too. Well, what I was thinking when you said that is that whenever I'm defensive, I take it as a sign that part of me is afraid I'm wrong. So, and getting angry at someone like Rush Limbaugh has to be built on part of me being afraid he's right. Because if I was really convinced that he was wrong, I wouldn't get angry at him. I would understand how deluded he was and think about how to counter it, but I wouldn't be angry about it.
And even serve him.
Right.
I mean, how to forgive them for they know not what they do. Where's that come from?
Yeah.
Who said that? Oh, yeah, him.
So, what is it? Why am I afraid I'm wrong? My beliefs are like built on sand over here, it looks like, if I'm getting angry. And so, what am I afraid of? What am I afraid of about what they're doing? Is it maybe partly exposing that I don't know what I'm talking about?
I think that's part of it. On an objective level, certainly, what they're talking about doing is imposing their theological, political agenda on your life.
Yeah.
And of course, you could say exactly the same is true for them. They really believe in death panels. And when I was, is that what you're going to make there I go, almost. They're going to make us go to school with the darkies. Oh, horrors. They're going to let the darkies ride in the front of the bus. Oh, no. It was the end of civilization as we knew it. Wrong. We've got to stop. We've got to win in Vietnam. Send more troops, because it'll be like a domino effect. Then China and Laos, Thailand and Laos and Cambodia and all those will go. Go where? Wrong. Didn't happen. Humility is starting to wake up to these statistical facts. Because a lot of people think the reason we lost in Vietnam was because of the long-haired freaks like me who demonstrated against the war. We didn't have support at home.
And I think that's what's driving a lot of the conservative reactionism right now is the fear that the country as they knew it is gone and will be very clearly gone soon when the white people are a distinct minority.
Oh, for the good
happening.
old days, back in the Gilded Age, when you could work children for a penny an hour until
Yeah.
they dropped, until there was no such thing as a union. They've pretty well effectively done that now. 7% of the workforce is unionized. And look at what you've got. Look at the ethics that allows a Congress to be just overtly bought. Your congressional branch is bought and paid for. And if you think an ordinary person has any chance in hell of becoming president, I'd like to have some of what you're smoking. Please call and leave us the number so we can meet up and connect. It must be good. So you start seeing
Clinton
consistent facts. I mean, people, what's that old thing about before you're 30, if you're not a liberal, you have no heart. And when you're anyone who's not conservative after they're 30 has no brain or something. Well, I'm looking at the track record, babies. I've been liberal, progressive, radical. I prefer radical. Since I was 16 years old. I'm 65. I haven't changed. If anything, I've become worse. So, and I base this solely on what I believe to be as a reasonably objective sifting of the facts. Where I stumble is in making the people who are on the other side wrong, blaming them. Some of the greatest lines ever written in pop music was, and I hate that even put the term together, was by Leonard Cohen in his Story of Isaac. And if you call me brother now, forgive me if I ask, according to whose plan? For when all has come to dust, I will kill you if I must. I will love you if I can. And may I never learn to scorn the body out of chaos born, the woman and the man. Have mercy on our uniforms, man of peace, man of war. The peacock spreads his fan. The universe is the peacock, fan of God.
Mm-hmm.
And we are all expressions of God in amnesia. That's what our work says. So how dare anyone think they're above their brother and sister or other?
Well, and some people might wonder, well, why is this show so focused on politics? Why have we kept coming back and back and back to it?
That's a good question.
Starting from where Arthur started from, which was about loving each other. And I think you kind of hinted at it just a few minutes ago. For me, that what we're really talking about here is how does our society look? How do we live together? And for me, that can be a way to define the conservative-liberal split. That a conservative, they believe in social Darwinism, which is the idea that of competition and struggling against each other, and that everybody is separate and fighting for dominance, and that you get the best result by setting up a system in which it's all about struggle for dominance, and that's what capitalism is. And a liberal has a different way of thinking about society, and that's more of a cooperative system in which we work together and we perceive each other as brothers and sisters. We are one family, really, large family, together in this together. And my well-being depends on your well-being. That when a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And so we need to build a system in which, a cooperative system in which we all rise together. And that's what a more socialist system is. It's not some evil, horrible foreign thing, but it's recognizing that in cooperation we do better. And a lot of that's one thing that science has been showing more and more is that, for a long time it was all competition was everything in how societies function, all different societies in the animal world. And more evidence has been showing that there's a lot of cooperation in animal societies and in human societies, and that many societies work better through the cooperation. So, and when we love each other, that's what you want to do. When you love someone, you want them to do better, and you want to help them do better. And you realize that you do better when they do better. And that's what we're talking about here. So for the politics is just the working out and how we're doing that.
Well, I wouldn't even say just.
Yeah.
It is the working out.
Right.
Jesus again said, by their deeds you will know them.
Right.
And the politics are the deeds, the actual dynamics of a society.
Right. So in, say, healthcare, do we all do better if everyone in our society is healthy? I mean, it seems to me pretty clear that we would advance as a culture if we made it so that everyone in our society was healthy and best able to be a productive member of the society, and that healthcare is about, is really a way for us to work together better as a society, and that to have that conservative view of it where, only certain people get access because you have to earn it, and that's part of our competitive capitalist system. Well, that seems to me to be counterproductive to a healthy, well-functioning society.
I was getting a mental image when you were saying this. It was a wagon train. It's dangerous out there. There are Indians who are kind of resentful of, this honky invasion of their their land that they've lived on for time out of mind. It's a hostile environment, and so instead of everybody striking out on their own wagon with a couple of mules pulling it, they go on a train, and when they're under attack, they circle the wagons and form a defensive ring where the Indians ride around and around and get picked off one by one until they're decimated. So it's like that kind of cooperation. That. So being polarized, which this is another thing that we are oligarchy. What does that mean?
That means the rule by a few.
Yeah, that's what Bob Summerby ends this column describing that's what we live under. It's a plutocracy pretending to be a democracy. We're bought and sold. 95% of us are de facto slaves. That's what we think. And the reason the handful of the rich and powerful, rich/powerful, synonyms, maintain their hold over us and their power is they keep us fighting each other. This big group of conservative poor people and this big group of liberal poor people are butting heads and fighting each other.
That's right.
And the needle kind of swings back and forth between the two, but nothing ever really changes, except the rich get richer, which they're doing, fellow slaves. So maybe we could meet in the light. Maybe we could meet on a common ground of humility and put aside our anger and put aside our belief that we're better than the other side and try to open our eyes to what objectively is going on here. And I think that's the only hope we've got.
Well, putting aside the big picture and talking about the personal, I have to say you're more fun to be around when you're not angry.
We've noticed it on a number of shows, not just on the show, of course. But I feel better when there's not angry tirades on this show. And I want to put any more negativity out there. There's plenty of it. I used to say at times that I wish I was the Rush Limbaugh of the left. I don't want that job. I don't want to be a muckraker. I don't want to be a hate monger.
Well, and you can help me with my anger by not being angry yourself.
There you go.
So
I'll take the log out of my own eye.
That's right.
See, better to take the
log out of my eye.
Little tiny.
Listen, I've talked about my anger on this show. So anyway, thanks for tuning in.